Australian Workplace Culture, a guide for newly arrived migrants. In this third part of our presentation, we'll be looking at Australian attitudes to work, hierarchy and leadership, organisational communication, achieving success in the Australian workplace, employer expectations, and 10 top tips for skilled migrants. Australian attitudes to work, hierarchy and leadership are quite different to many other cultures. Australians generally prefer to maintain a work-life balance, believing in the principle of working to live rather than living to work. In general, the Australian workplace is usually not overly formal and hierarchical, but there are clear lines of authority and decision-making. Workers usually talk on an equal basis with their superiors, sometimes using humour or irreverence, which can be seen as a sign of disrespect in other cultures. Promotions in the Australian workplace are usually based on merit and seniority rather than on other factors. Being a good team member is an important skill sought by Australian employers. And workers in lower level positions such as cleaners, filing clerks and delivery people are usually treated with the same level of respect and as equals by those above them. In high context cultures such as China or India, decisions and activities focus around personal, face-to-face relationships, often around a central person who has authority. In low context cultures such as Australia, work and activities are task-centred. Decisions and activities focus around what needs to be done and the division of responsibilities. With regard to organisational communication, employers in Australia want employees to communicate openly and take responsibility for their opinions and actions. In this real-life example, an Australian manager unfamiliar with working in Asia regularly asked his new team to provide him with feedback so as to get the experienced advice of his local staff on the best way to run the company. However, he found it very difficult to get their support, as his Asian staff found it very strange that a manager should ask such a thing, and had interpreted this request as ignorance, deciding that the manager didn't know much about management or his new role. So, how does all of this information help you to achieve success in the Australian workplace? We've already seen that it's important for migrants to be able to identify differences in culture, communication and social behaviour. And Australians definitely have different ideas about leadership and hierarchy and organisational communication. But it's important to always note that Australian employers prefer employees who are appropriately skilled, who take the initiative and are assertive when necessary, who are able to work independently or in diverse teams, who have good problem solving, planning and organisational skills, who demonstrate good, strong communication skills, and who show enthusiasm and are self-motivated. It can sometimes be difficult for international employees and migrants to become comfortable in the Australian workplace when they do not understand the expectations of employers. Let's take a look at another case study. Gunawan is from Indonesia and was employed a couple of months ago in a large local firm. His boss, Graham, is finding that Gunawan hasn't worked out as well as he'd hoped, but he can't pinpoint why. Graham says, "I'm not sure about Gunawan. I know he has great skills, but he seems to need direction constantly. I think he has some good ideas, and I keep asking him to speak up in meetings, but he just goes along with what everyone else thinks. The rest of the team don't seem to like him much. He's a bit of an outsider. I seem to be missing something, but I'm not sure what the problem is." Gunawan says, "I'm very unhappy here. I always listen to Graham and try to carry out his instructions to the best of my ability, but I don't think he's happy with my performance. I'm always ready to anticipate his needs and offer him my support, but meetings are especially difficult. Everyone speaks so quickly. I find it hard to follow. I was invited to the pub after work a few times, but I don't drink and I'm not sure I have much in common with my colleagues." What do you think is the problem between Gunawan and his boss? The issue is that to give and receive feedback and to take initiative on projects is expected in Australia. It's important to stress that there are polite ways of doing this in the Australian context, and watching and asking other colleagues is a good way to learn this strategy. Employees are also expected to be able to work independently without much supervision or input from managers, but also, when necessary, to be team players. This involves working well with other people, having good interpersonal skills such as listening, being able to give input into project planning when necessary, and being able to negotiate when there are differences or disagreements. Australian workplaces tend to be very goal or task oriented, focused on getting the project or product completed within a fixed time frame and to a certain standard. Because of this, personal qualities such as punctuality, enthusiasm, and motivation are highly regarded. Are you becoming disillusioned or depressed about the difficulties in finding appropriate employment or understanding your new workplace? Don't despair. I have 10 top tips for migrants who are new to the Australian workplace culture. Treat others as your equal. Australia has inequality, and Australian workplaces do have hierarchies, but people tend to speak with each other as equals. Be equally polite to both the office cleaner and the boss. Understand Australian manners. Different languages have different ways of expressing politeness. In Australia, if you don't use please, thank you, and excuse me a lot, you may be judged as impolite. Always be punctual. Plan to arrive 15 minutes before a job interview and don't be late for meetings. Know your responsibilities. Be aware of employer expectations. Being clear about job roles and responsibilities in your vocational field will make it easier for you to excel. Know your rights. Australian governments have laws that protect employee rights, laws to ensure a safe workplace and to promote equality of opportunity. Communication is critical. Always continue to improve your English. Learn how Australians make casual conversation in the workplace and learn colloquialisms and jargon. Be aware of non-verbal communication as well, particularly in job interviews. Build a bridge. Carefully identify well-respected local training that can deepen your understanding of Australian standards, processes and specifications. But remember, practical work experience is highly valued in Australia. Be realistic. It's unlikely that you will be able to start your new career at the same level that you were in your country of origin. Sometimes you have to go backward to go forward, so be prepared to start lower so that you can learn and progress in your new country. Know that your contribution is valued. Australia's prosperity and diverse culture are largely due to the many migrants who have made Australia their home. Most Australians recognise this and appreciate it, or are migrants themselves. Be positive. We have one of the best economies in the developed world and a falling unemployment rate. It's only a matter of time before the right job comes along. That concludes the final presentation in this series. I hope that you have enjoyed all three presentations and have found the information in them practical and useful. If you would like to contact me or comment on or recommend these webinars to others, you're most welcome to do so at http://uwalker.net. Thanks for listening.